famous people. So we are the ordinary people. How can we balance our life? And
એટલે તો આપણે એવું કરવા કઈ જયા નથી ગાંધીજીની માફક ઘરમાં બેઠા છે બેલેન્સ જ કરવાનું છે.
But trying to find the balance is not an easy task.
yeah.
એટલે આપણે કેવું કે સમાજના ડર, આનો ડર, બધાના ડરથી આપણે પછીથી આપણે જે કરવાનું છે તે કર્યા જ કરવું પડે. આપણે બીજું કરવું છે પણ you cannot get out from this માળો. If you want to do it, but how can you get out? આપણે બધું એટલી બધી રિસ્પોન્સિબિલિટી લઈને બેસી ગયા અને જો ના કરો તો તમારા પર બધા ચડી વાગે.
100% ના સાચી વાત.
But Smitaben, why you want?
તમે તમારું એક કર્મ તમારા ઘરના માટે ના કર્યું હોય તો તમારા પર બધા જ આવીને તમને ડફડા મારવા મળે. તો
Smitaben, why you want to get out of
from
your
that
karma?
nest, you know? It is very difficult.
Pratap is asking.
My question to you, my question to Mahatma Gandhi, to Swami, everyone is this: why you have to get out of the karma which you are supposed to be doing?
I think it comes down to balancing which takes more precedence in, how do you balance both sides.
Yes,
and if you find that you cannot balance it, you let go what is the lower one, which is what this is Maslow's theory is. And the next slide is
I
going to-
see the lower one
Okay,
is
let us see the Maslow's theory.
Yeah. अनिल भाई दिखाया नहीं है, क्या है? अनिल भाई नहीं दिखाया, दिखाया जी?
ના નથી આયા.
આપણે આમાં કેટલા બતાવે? 5 જ છે.
હવે 5 નથી એટલે 4.
Next slide પર આવી જાઓ ને એટલે let's move on the next slide.
આ મોસ્લોનું છે.
Yeah, એટલે Maslow ની બધી slide છે. There is slides on Maslow. It will come next, maybe one or two slide will come. So Maslow's hierarchy is basically, it's a triangle, it's a pyramid, very lower level and a higher level. So everyone goes through the stages and deal to explain. So leadership is the one that looks from the top and sacrifices the lower level. Okay. So we'll go to the next slide and then we'll come to Maslow and maybe a slide or down. No, let's go. Keep it as it is.
Okay. Right here?
No, just go back. Somehow Maslow is not there. જબ આગળ જતું નથી ને, જુઓ ને જરા.
પાછળ જવાનું કે છે ને?
ના
બસ આ Maslow.
Okay.
પછી
all right, go to the next one. There are some slides, I know for sure. Okay. Attitude adjustment and Gita. Your only duty is to act, right to work, and not to hanker up the fruits or results thereof. We already talked about that. So this is the management principle. Neither the purpose of your action nor the work should bind and blind you. So not only it should be such that you are bound to the sansar, but it should not be such that you are become blinded by that also. So it should not be bind and blind. Am I making sense? So you should be such that you are able to attach, not be attached to the action, to the result of the action, but it should not be such that you are blinded by the only thing that is good for me and nothing else. So you should not be binding as well as blinding. Yeah, Dinesh bhai.
So why should you be blinded and binded by society good? If you
bind by personal gain.
No, I understand, but my question is, we should not be bounded or blinded by personal good to do society good. But my question, why should I be bounded towards the society group?
Because that's a higher level of function. So Sarva Dharma takes the precedence over Swadharma. So personal gain is sublated to the higher common good. That is the idea of Karma Yoga.
Okay.
The work is to worship with total non-attachment and selfless attitude. So basically, in one of the slides that I sent you was something like this: work as worship, and eventually work becomes worship. Work and worship. So basically, if you think of secular and religious, so work is secular, religion is the worship. So work and worship. The next stage is work as worship. And the third is work itself is worship. So essentially the transition is from work and worship as a separate entity becomes work, becomes worship itself. So for a karma yogi, the work is nothing but worship, and worship to the God that resides in everybody else. That is the idea. All right, let's move on. So we already know about 4 pathways of salvation. There is not that we have talked about bhakti, Raj Yoga, Karma Yoga, and Jnana Yoga. So path of action is what we are talking here right now. All right, let's move on. I think we already have talked about yoga. What is the meaning of yoga? I mean, yuj means joining. Yoke is the way. That's called yoking. Like you are being yoked to the Godhead or Brahman or whatever you want to call it. All right, we'll just move on next one. I'm trying to find those slides. I don't know where they are. Central doctrine of yoga. So this is the Vivekananda's famous statement where he essentially begins to equate all the pathways. That I believe was the first time that the people in authority, or at least somebody who is advanced, began to equate all the 4 pathways on an equivalent plane. Until that point, either it was a fight between who is Jnana Yoga is superior or Bhakti Yoga is superior. That was always the argument back and forth. People who were sannyasis believed in Jnana Yoga, and other Vaishnavite school talked about Bhakti Yoga. Karma Yoga and essentially was always subletted. So this is the first time Vivekananda actually around 1896 or so began to say something like this. Each soul is potentially divine. The goal is to manifest divinity within by controlling nature, external and internal. And the next one he says, do this either by work, which is karma, worship, that is bhakti, by psychic control, which is Raja Yoga, or meditation, or philosophy, which is Jnana Yoga. By one or more or all of this and be free. So that is the first time at least somebody in a higher authority began to equate all of them together in the same plane. All right, let's move on. Basic principles of Karma Yoga. It is not what one does that counts, but how one does whatever he or she does. So not the action, not the work. It may be menial work, but how one does it is more important than actual specific work. That is the point he's making. God cares not for the verb, but the adverb. So essentially, same point, how one does the work is what God cares for. Karma Yoga forms the heart of spirituality and morality intersection, and there are a few slides on that. Does one continue to sin if Christ atoned for it? So basically the point is this: if Christ was born to atone for my sin, should I continue doing the sin? Because he's going to atone me for that anyway. That's the idea. That's a question that you can argue. If Christ was there born to take away everybody's sin, so maybe who the heck cares? I mean, I just keep on doing what I need to do. Let him do the job of atoning my sin. All right, let's move on. Doctrine of Karma Yoga. This is again Gita, I think 2nd chapter. But thou has only gotten right to work. I think we already covered that. You have the control over doing your respective duty only, but no control or claim over the result. The fruit of work should not be your motive. I think we already covered that as well. Let's move on. Different translation. Karma and Karma Yoga. Karma is an action in general which leads to reaction and a bondage. We already covered that part. So this is kind of summary of that. Karma Yoga is a technique of doing karma leading to liberation from the sansar, or cycle of birth and rebirth and salvation. And what are they? The keys are doership. Oh, finish you. No. Oh.
Sorry.
Finish.
Sorry.
So koi locho maryo. All right.
I
Doership.
keep my fingers so close to as soon as you say go to next. અને કંઈક આડું અવડું અટકી જાય તો આવું થઈ જાય.
I know.
Doership. Basically devoid of ego. That's what Dinesh Bhai was talking about it. Because doership means I am willing to let go my ego to say that I am the instrument of the activity. I am the instrument of the action. I am not the doer. The work is being done through me, but I am not the one who is doing it.
Instrument.
So I am the instrument. That is avoiding the ego, or let the ego go away. Means an attitude. Swadharma is performed for Sarvadharma. We talked about that. And is again Varnashram Dharma. So essentially action that is conducive to your station in life. You know, what your station in life makes a difference. Like the question you asked, my family, second level, 25 to 50. What is it called?
Family, yeah.
Whatever. So
Yeah.
essentially, your responsibility lies to the family. If you go away from that, and like what we talked about Gandhiji, leaving his family obligation on to higher good. So that's a question that one has to ponder over, whether you are willing to do it. But then most of us will not. Only exceptional people will leave their family obligation and move on. Nishkam karma. So that is the principle, that is the Karma Yoga's principle. Activity performed without intention of doing good for only myself. That is the Nishkam karma. For Gandhi and for Karma Yoga, essentially that is equal to salvation. Action performed without the selfish interest of my own is the way to salvation. That is the principle of Karma Yoga. It's a middle path between an obsession with the desired result and indifference to result. Now that's a question people ask. But if you do it without the motivation of a fruit, you will become indifferent to the result. So it is not necessary so. You want a specific result, but you are not obsessed by a specific result. You accept the result even if it's not what you expected it to be. So that's a basically middle path, call it that way. It is a renunciation of inaction. It is not renunciation of action. So you are performing the action, but you are renouncing the result. You are renouncing it for common good. It is not renouncing the action itself. So it's a renunciation in action, but not of action. That's the principle of Karma Yoga as well. All right, let's move on. Again, summarize.
Rajan bhai, renunciation, is it inaction or inaction?
No, renunciation in action. No, not inaction, in action.
Okay.
Two separate.
Yeah, two separate words, yeah. Principles of Karma Yoga in Gita. Right attitude, right motive, do your duty, follow the discipline of the job, do the best to serve the God and self in all. That's basic principle of those who see me in all and all in me is not lost on me. So self in all is the principle that God resides in everyone else. So serving them is serving to God. Okay, let's move on. Okay, so this is the one that I was referring as far as the slide is concerned. I think there is the next one. So there are two things that you need to think through. Why don't you go to the next slide before we come back to this one?
Okay.
Okay, so question is, if you draw two lines perpendicular to each other, one is attachment on the top, you can see the picture, attachment and detachment on the bottom, and one side is vikarma, which is a good karma, bad karma, and one side is sakarma, that is good karma. Okay, so you think in terms of one does the action, and where you see the most acts is the highest action. One that is good karma and is done for common good with the sense of detachment as the highest value, because it does not involve your ego, It does not involve doership itself. You accept that you are doing it as an instrument of God, and it is done for common good. So the one has the maximum X, is the highest. So moral axis and spiritual axis are drawn perpendicular to each other. So you think in terms of, if you do an action on the, let's go to the other side of the right top, you know. So you do a vikarma, that means bad action with the attachment. Who will do it? The one who is most motivated by selfish desire, like things like cheating, things like killing. So one will do the job only if you are attached to the result, bad result, good for you but bad for the society, and it is bad for the society. So you think in terms of moral axis and spiritual axis are perpendicular. On one side is detachment, one side is attachment. On the other side is good action versus bad action. So you can draw the 4 angles, and you will see the severity of bad things and the greatness of good things. So if you think in the left lower quadrant is the best one, right upper quadrant is the worst one, and the other two are in between those two. So you can, depending upon how you view it, if you are attached to the result, you still can do good things. You know, if you look on the left upper quadrant, because you are still helping the society, but you are not doing the karma yoga per se. It's a lower form of karma yoga, because you are attached to your result yourself, but you are still doing good. Am I making sense?
Yeah.
Okay. Now let's go back to the slide, the one before. Okay. So moral axis. Morality deals with fellow human beings. Are we doing good for other people or doing bad for other people? So that's a morality. Am I performing a right or wrong action? If you are doing a good action, right action is good for the other people. If you're doing a bad thing, it's a bad for the moral point of view. Spiritual axis deals with, are you attached or you are detached? If you are attached, you will be more likely to perform selfish action. If you are detached, you are more likely to perform action which is good for other people. That is the idea. So am I attached or detached from the action which I am performing? The attitude of performing work with a spirit of dedication rather than acquisitiveness promotes reflective inner disposition. So essentially what he says, acquisitiveness means if you do an action for the personal gain, more money, more wealth, more stuff, whatever good stuff that you want to achieve, you will be attached. You will be doing it because you are attached to it. The only way you can do common good is if you are detached from the acquisition of the stuff for your personal gain. That is the point. So Vedantic view is this: Godhead is efficient as material cause of the universe. Dynamics change when Godhead is the material cause of the universe. So essentially you accept is that God has become the universe. So what you are doing for God is equal to what you are doing for other people. So essentially they become same. What is done for common good for everybody else is done for Godhead as well. So it's a bhakti yoga combined with karma yoga. All right, let's move on. Unless you have comments, questions. खबर नहीं slide पे slide का जती रही. We may have missed some of the slide, but we'll come and find it later on.
Okay.
So Deming, this is the management tool. Many of you study management, you will know this. You know, Deming was a pioneering worker or academician in 1960s or maybe 1950s who developed it's called PDCA cycle. Plan, do, check, and act. Originally, the way it came about is General Motors, when they were making the line work karta na balu, General Motors will make manufacturing parts. So it just goes on a conveyor belt.
Yeah.
So if you make a mistake on the very first stage, By the time the product is done, only you will realize when the product is finished that it's a defective product. So what he did was basically to check at every level before it goes to the next, from A to B to C to D. So idea was basically Deming cycle is plan. So you think in terms of what you want to do, then do, and then check at every level, at every juncture you check and act. So if you find that level A you made a mistake, then don't go to B, because the first mistake, if it's not neutralized, it will continue going forward until you reach X, XYZ, or the end. So the idea was basically called PDCA cycle, or idea is, there is mentioned in many different ways, but original idea was Deming cycle called PDCA, is called Shewhart cycle also. So the action performed by an individual for common good applies there too. That you plan for an action for the end result was expected to be good for the society. But if you find yourself in the middle, is that it is not going as you planned, you can stop at that point and redo the action again. It is, and if you still make a mistake and if you still end up with a bad result, then you accept the bad result. But it's not that you accept, you continue doing the work and you accept the bad result at the end. You ought to do exactly same way that management theory explains. Is like Deming cycle is, that you continue to monitor as you move along on each level going forward. That is the principle of management that applies to Karma Yoga too. So that.
So in your day-to-day life, at the end of the day, you just write down your, whole day. What did you do? What are the stuff you should not do? What are the stuff you need to do? So that is the analysis at whole day. What did you do? So that is your life can change, right?
It can. I mean, if you keep on monitoring what you are doing, and keep a watch on what you are doing, it will, end result will come good. Chances are good that it will come good.
So next day you don't do that.
Precisely the point. So the that is the idea. If you make a mistake, you mess it up in the middle of what you're doing, then don't continue going forward. Just go back and start from all over again. That is the idea.
It was also known as theoretical process control. And in 60s, it used to be that people would say, oh, this is made in Japan because the quality was so bad.
Precisely.
That's when Japanese invited him, he moved to Japan. And next thing, the quality improved substantially. And that's where the auto industry in America realized that what he taught Japanese, which we did not implement.
Yeah, you're right. How Japan took over the auto industry is based on Deming's theory.
Yeah.
Deming went to Japan and taught this process, how General Motors was making a mess of defective product after defective product, and how you can, as a matter of fact, the study showed something like this, and I don't remember the exact number, but something like this. For every 100 cars that GM made, 10% of those had some kind of defect. And by the time Deming perfected the technique, it had dropped to 3 in Japanese cars, and now it is less than 1%, because the technique kept on being perfected as they moved along. So there was a huge difference in 70s and 80s when Datsun and then Toyota came in the market in America, because their level of perfection was significantly better
than the American
car. But then American companies also began to catch up. So now they have, both of them have reduced from 3 to 1% or less than 1%. So essentially what they do is, if there are 10 steps, at every step, they verify that there is nothing wrong, and then they will proceed further. Until 1950s and 60s, when there was a mass production of GM cars, what used to happen is that by the time they came to realize, it was already late in the cycle. So the car was already defective in some respect, which was not possible to correct. So that was the idea. Let's see if there is any other slide. And if not, then we may have to go back and find those couple of slides. Niskam karma, okay. Basically, Niskam karma essentially mimics the PDCA cycle. You know, the action, if you think in terms of what the ultimate product is, it adds a dimension. It is done not for my personal gain. So the perfection is achieved not for my individual gain, but for common good. That is Niskam karma. So essentially marrying principle of PDCA cycle or Deming cycle into Niskam karma is basically karma yoga. And with the equipoise of the mind, so that is the sthita prajna idea, that if one was to find your result in a bad situation, you still maintain the equilibrium of your mind and don't get swayed by emotion, essentially. So somebody asked Mahatma Gandhi about how he manages to stay calm in this constant turmoil. So essentially he cited Gita. You know, the second chapter Gita, where he talks about sthita prajna. You know, you accept result as it comes, as a God's gift, and don't get too emotionally attached to, either too pleased or too depressed with the positive or negative outcome. That is how he manages to survive. All right, let's move on. Okay, stages of detachment. Now this basically attachment to the result. So basically you're looking at the means and ends. So you correct the means for the end with the end that you want. So you're attached. The next level is commitment to the X, but detachment from the result. So you are committed to doing the work, but you are not attached to the result itself. So that is the second level. Desireless action is Gandhian doctrine teaches act as a worship. We already talked about, because you are not attached to the fruit of the action. Sirdar to Sardar, one who can sacrifice his head, ego, and selfishness can become the true leader. This is Guru Gobind Singh. So essentially ego, how one lets go ego. So Sirdar, Sir means head, to Sardar. The one who lets go the ego becomes a Sardar. That is what Guru Gobind Singh wrote.
તો સરદારજી ને જોક કર્યા કરે સરદાર.
That is a different issue altogether.
આટલું બધું અંદર છે.
Well, Sardar in this respect is the leader, not the Sardar in the joke. Non-attachment implies precisely the absence of obsession with the desired result. I think repeating the same issue. 3 levels. One is indifference, second is reasonable expectation, and third is the obsession. So you want to have a reasonable expectation. You don't want indifference on the one side and obsession on the other side. That is the way of Niskam karma. Detachment or vairagya can only be achieved by gaining the control of the mind, which is what Lord Krishna says. That is the way of sthita prajna. The mind doesn't move one way or the other. All right. Ashok bhai. Okay, we already covered four goals of life: karma, kama, artha, dharma, and moksha. So I don't think that we need to talk about that. We kind of covered some of this. What is dharma in respect to karma yoga?
એ જ અત્યારે આપણે કરીએ છીએ.
Right.
Yeah.
My own voice is Swadharma. Community voice is Sarvadharma. God's voice is ultimate spiritual union. Rita is the natural order of things. We already covered most of this stuff already. So we'll just move on next one.
Okay.
Okay, so this was the one that I was talking about, the balance. So you think in terms of spiritual leader. Dharma and artha. Artha means not necessarily money itself, but possession, things to acquire, not necessarily money only, but fame, money, anything you can think of. So it's a tightrope. Dharma or righteous versus artha on the other side, which is profit, wealth, possession, whatever. So basically, that's the dilemma of a spiritual leader. The one who is able to walk on a rope, balancing personal versus impersonal. That is the idea. So when you try to lean on righteousness and dharma and common good, you end up often leaving the other side, because often walking on a tightrope is not easy to do. So you essentially tilt on one side. And that's the point of a spiritual leader. All right. Okay, now that's where it comes. So what is Maslow's hierarchy? Maslow was a sociologist who, this is a very well-known thesis. Everyone in life works with five needs. First is physiological needs, what day in, day out we. Second is safety needs. We do things which are safe for me and my family. Third is social needs. We do things which is for social interaction. Fourth one is esteem. We do things so that we get recognition, or at least people begin to recognize you as somebody who is good or bad or whatever. So you do things for societal acceptance or societal recognition. And the fifth level is self-actualization. So the higher you go, you do things that are for your own spiritual evolution. Everybody does whatever his physiological need is there. Everybody will do it. Everybody will do safety needs for me and my family. Everybody will do social interaction things in living in the society. Many people will do things so that they are recognized for whatever good things they do. But the last level is someone does the work only for personal satisfaction or personal evolution. That is self-actualization. And that is the pathway to moksha. Now, this was written for sociology, and in the later half of his life, he added one more dimension to this, and the next slide is that. Transpersonal. So added one more triangle to that, that you do things not only for self-actualization, but you do things for transcendence to this life itself. So essentially God or Godhead or whatever you believe it to be. So a true leader will do things, the common man will do things that are at the lower level. Physiological need, safety needs, social needs, everything, everybody will do it. The higher you go, the leader will do things from the top. For him, the lower level stuff is sacrificable. So the point I was making in the previous slide, in the one that we left out, a true test of a leader is the one who is doing things from the top. A spiritual leader will think of transpersonal and self-actualization. Or the national leader will think in terms of self-actualization and esteem. Esteem is obviously important for politicians, because he wants to be recognized. But eventually he does things for what makes him tick. That he did something good for not only for the society, but for himself, for his own evolution into hierarchy of things. So a true leader is the one who looks from the top and lets go the bottom if need arises. A common person like you and me will always be obsessed by the first three things. It will be hard for us to reach beyond fourth, fifth, and sixth level. That's the point. So Maslow's hierarchy is the way how a person behaves in life. So basically, he makes a point is that everybody is obsessed with physiological need and safety needs and social needs. And they don't go beyond that. At upper level go to esteem needs. They'll do because they want to recognize in whatever they do. Higher you go, they'll do it for not only be recognized, but they want to feel themselves that they did something, achieve in their life. And beyond that will be transpersonal. That is divine quality, if you want to call that. So self-actualization and self-realization are the highest goal of a spiritual leader. That is equivalent to Karma Yoga. So if you think in terms of Vivekananda did or RMK did or Gandhi did, or you can think of those, or a political leader like FDR, obviously he had to meet all his personal things, but you reach a point where you do begin to think in terms of national responsibility, not only your personal responsibility. That is the idea. So a true leader reverses the priority from top to bottom rather than bottom to top. And that is the idea of Karma Yoga.
See, Gandhi ne બધા political way they went ahead. Jare RMK ne they went spiritual.
Spiritual.
Yeah.
But Gandhi was a mixture of politician who was a spiritual leader as well. So he had a mix. I mean, someone made a comment is that Gandhi started his life as a spiritualist and became a political leader because politics was thrust upon him. It was not something that he was longing for, but politics was thrust upon his spiritual longing. So, I mean, it's a mixture of both. But Vivekananda, in more respect, was more spiritual, less inclined politically. RMK was pure spiritual, very little interest in politics. So was Maharishi Mahesh. And you can use Arvindo, who was a mixture of both. Started as a politician, ended up in a spiritual domain over the later half of his life. So essentially the idea is, the triangle essentially is higher, the people who reach the highest Karma Yoga will be at the top, be obsessed with the top. People like you and me will be basically moving along the lower category. That is the idea. Let's see if there is anything left. I knew I had some slides of this. Yeah, okay. We already covered most of the stuff in this slide. Isha said, we talked about the whole world is covered, is enveloped by the God. So we don't need to talk about that. I'm just going to add a few more things. The idea of Daridra Narayan, he coined the word, Narayan is God. I mean, Vishnu Bhagwan. But he basically started saying Daridra Narayan. So essentially poor. The people, the Narayan residing in the poor people is Daridra Narayan. Or the other concept he uses, Harijan. After a scheduled caste kehta tha, so he coined the word called Harijan. So essentially what he did was, Jan means you and me, people. And Harijan means, so essentially he coined the word which essentially signifies the point is that the people are equivalent to God. So that is his contribution to Hinduism, call it that way. Because he sort of changed the triangle or quadrilateral, made the point of Karma Yoga being the most important part rather than the other two. He wasn't too interested in Jnana Yoga and Bhakti Yoga, but Karma Yoga became his essence, more or less. All right, let's move on. And I'm just summarizing some of these key things. This is what Mahatma Gandhi writes at some point in time about Gita. The object of Gita appears to me to be of that showing the most excellent way to obtain self-realization, that matchless remedy is renunciation of the fruit of the action. That's his first principle. So what does he derive from Gita? He summarizes his points. This is what I, renunciation of the fruit of the action is the first principle that he derives from Gita.